I think we should probably just jump in here and
Yeah, for sure.
I'll give a quick intro and then
Perfect.
we'll jump into it. So just want to give everybody a big thank you and a big welcome. We're excuse me. I'm Todd White from Guide CX. I'm the co-founder here at Guide CX, and I also run the sales team. And what's awesome is we got connected here with Ryan here at Pulse, and just a plug for getting out there, getting the community, shaking hands, and getting to know people. I always believe that one conversation leads to the next, and one relationship kind of leads to the next thing. And so it was really awesome just to get to know Ryan there at Pulse. That's the Gainside event. And in connecting with Ryan, one of the things that he and I talked about was just managing stress, and this is his wheelhouse. And so Ryan comes to us, right, as a former CS leader, and ended up, and he's probably going to take you down more of his journey in a personal way, but ended up coming up with these ways to manage stress and how to get more out of your work and to be more productive. And this day, I think every single cliche about work more with less right now is the name of the game and the efficiency game. And when you start to hear that, in my mind, it's okay, companies, you need to run more lean, you need to get done with more less. Like the amount of stress just starts to pile up more, I think, now than it has ever been, because everyone is trying to do more with less. And as this topic has come up, it became really cool as I walked through this presentation earlier with Ryan. I said, man, like this is something that everybody can take advantage of. Let's jump on a webinar together. Let's push this information out, because to me, this is just phenomenal content about that stuff. So anyways, Ryan, they're all warmed up for you. Everyone's ready to go, but we're really looking forward to more of this content here with you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Todd. I'm super excited that we got to meet in Pulse, and I'm looking forward to covering this today. I see a couple familiar names on the list. If I haven't met you already, my name is Ryan Johansen. I'm based out of the Boston area. I run a company called Stress Less and Get More Done. So today's presentation, we're going to be talking about how you can to work smarter to burn out less. And there's a very big correlation between burning out and not being productive, and taking care of yourself and being more productive, that I tended to learn the hard way. I'm going to do about an interactive 30-minute presentation. I had you put in your name and where you're coming from earlier. So I'm going to come to you and ask you a couple questions in the chat. It makes it a lot more enjoyable for everyone. I don't want to monologue too much here. But for today's agenda, the first thing we're going to go through is a quick exercise that you can throw in during stressful times, where you can go from a state of being pretty stressed out to calming down, taking a step back, and more kind of objectively walking through some issues you might be facing. The second is a tool you can use to know where to focus your time. I'm sure a lot of us have a million things going on, and it can feel like you're on that hamster wheel. So another way, once you take a step back, you can figure out, okay, what's the first thing I can do to move forward? And then the last thing is just a quick, kind of easy to apply routine that you can start to do more in less time. And I will go through the math behind that. So I'd love to see in the chat, throw in a yes if this relates to anything that you might be going through lately. So, maybe your life looks like you got back-to-back meetings, you're doing more with less, you got email, Slack, you got whatever other messaging, whatever 3 other messaging tools you might be using too, are all pulling for your attention. You have people coming to you with issues constantly, and it feels like there's a lot of responsibility and you're just getting stretched thin. And that's kind of the reality that we're in right now, where things are getting leaner. We have tighter budgets, but we still have to get the work done. But there tends to be a human cost of this too, where more with less hits a breaking point, and you need to come up with some creative ideas to be able to handle some of these things. Because I'd say the good news is that it's not going to be forever, and I think even just that might be a helpful thing to remember yourself, that we all go through difficult times, but it isn't usually permanent. But I want you to know that, like, if you feel like you're drowning and you're having a hard time, don't beat yourself up over it. That's something that I definitely did when I was in that situation. And I'll go through that in a second. But what we want to talk about today is giving you some tools that you can apply. It's just a good way to really take a step back and make a couple of different changes. And I'm not saying we're radically overhauling our lives or making these sweeping changes, but I want to give you a couple simple things that helped me a lot when I was struggling. So you might be wondering, who the heck is this guy? I'm glad you joined without knowing me if you've never seen anything I've done before. But my story is something that I thought was, I was really ashamed of for a long time. But I found out it's a really common thing that happens to a lot of people, but not many people talk about it. So I was working at a tech company. I feel like I had arrived, I was doing really well, and then my CEO came up to me one day. He said, "Ryan, doing a great job. We want you to run your own team." And that's something I worked really hard for. I was really excited about. But the bad thing about that was the quick thing that I found out is that everyone else's problems soon became my problems. And then my old way of working was, hey, I'm success driven, I'm competitive, I want things to go right. So I'll just throw as many hours as I have to at it. But I hit this breaking point where my workload was so high and there were so many things that were on my plate that things started to fall off the plate. And that led to me taking things kind of personally. And then I wasn't taking good care of myself. And then I was reacting to the day. And then the harder I pushed, the more I struggled. And that led to me ultimately like not taking care of myself. I'm not sleeping. I was having panic attacks, working insane 90-hour weeks. And it hit me at the point where I had to check myself into a hospital because I was so stressed out and I was really struggling with it. And that felt like the complete lowest point in my life. I had this massive panic attack at work, but my boss told me, like, take as much time as you need and figure this out. So the good part about that is it made me radically open-minded to figuring out, okay, what are some things I can do to survive? Because that's a situation I didn't ever want to end up back in. So what helped me out a lot in that situation is I saw a poster of people like Abraham Lincoln and Winston Churchill and other people that have faced things like this. And it gave me some hope that, okay, if other people can figure out, maybe there's some things I can learn to make my situation a little bit better. So what I started doing was really looking into there was two things I tried to figure out. How can I get through work and take it a little less personally and not kind of go over the moon when things go wrong? But the other thing was, how do I keep up with my workload without working 90-hour weeks because it wasn't sustainable? So what we're going to talk about today is a few things on that first and second part. So those are the two questions that I try and get into. So I like to do a little bit of
It seems, Ryan, that a lot of people try to solve this problem with caffeine.
Oh
But
yeah, I still
coffee
like
ain't the
caffeine.
answer for this one
Yeah,
here.
it's there's a good term, diminishing returns. Same thing with like the amount of hours worked. That it gets you to a point, but it breaks off. Yeah, I had a sick caffeine addiction and still kind of do some days, but so I like to do kind of like the Rorschach test here. So in the chat, I'd love to hear what's the first word that comes to your mind when you think about stress. There's no wrong answers here. There's no gotcha or anything like that, but it's always helpful to have people just throw some stuff out. So time. Okay, that's a good one. What other things come like what comes to your mind when you think about stress? Tense, weight, yeah, like pressure, patience. Okay. Anyone else? Heavy breathing, tough. Yeah, okay. So I've done this probably hundreds of times now, and I probably under 1% of the times ever hear anything positive about stress. But going back to Todd's caffeine example, stress is a bodily function that actually can mimic, or caffeine can mimic the stress response. So it actually is something that can be helpful sometimes. But one thing that I found tremendously empowering was understanding what stress is and where it comes from, because the more that you know about it, you can start to use it to your advantage. And that's kind of the best case scenario, but avoiding the worst case scenario where you can at least be able to take a breath and not let it completely overrun you and take you into the ground. So, where stress comes from and what it is, it's the body's response to a threat that's either real or imagined. And what it comes from is our biological programming, and you might have heard the fight or flight response. And it's just the body's way of flooding you with chemicals like adrenaline and cortisol to make sure that you start breathing quicker, you're more engaged, you're more focused, so you can either fight a predator off or run away from it. So, nothing inherently bad from that, but here's the rub. Now we're in comfortable conditions. We can order any certain movie that we want. We can get whatever food we want delivered to our door, but we still have that same instinct to fight off a saber-toothed tiger when we get an email that things are going wrong. So it's a biological overreaction. Now, I'm not saying, I think one of the most annoying things I heard when I was really struggling is like, oh, just take a breath and calm down. because it's something where the more that you read into it, it can be a lot more challenging. But one of the traps that we fall into with stress is this falling into this cycle. And I like to call it the stress cycle. It's something that, as you can tell, I put this incredibly strong diagram together with all my PowerPoint skills. But here's kind of how it would work for me. And it's a really common thing that a lot of people deal with is where you get stuck is not dealing with the stress directly and letting the stress or stressing out about the stress. So the first thing that happens is a stressor occurs. So that can be, for the classic example, you get an email that a client's upset with you. Remember that it's a bodily function. So the first place that that actually has an impact is in your body. We all experience it in different ways. Maybe we start breathing a little bit quicker. Maybe our hands tighten. We start to feel it in our chest or our throat. It might be a little bit different for everyone, but that's the first place that it manifests. Now, where we get stuck is we go down this step right here, which can look a little bit different depending on the situation or how you're wired or what's going on. But I like to call this, it's the reaction to the stress or the story mode. Stress doesn't feel good, we relate it to something negative. So we either want to explain why it's going on or figure out a way to get away from it. So that immediately can result in panic, or maybe we're avoiding it and trying to get rid of it. So a good example is, that customer email comes and then you start, you feel stressed out about it. And then you start to go into that story mode of, oh no, I screwed up again. This is going to get even worse. I'm going to be in huge trouble. I'm going to lose my job. I'm going to go under a bridge. Because of that, and because stress is so challenging, you might go into an avoidance mode where that's something where maybe I'm, procrastinating. I'm looking into something else and doing other things to keep myself busy or doom scrolling. And then because I'm not directly dealing with that stress, it leads to more challenging outcomes. Maybe I didn't get that project done, or I didn't get respond to that email, or whatever, and whatever reason there. So I want to give you an exercise that you can directly apply in between the bodily sensation and the reaction and story mode. So we can learn to just sit with that stress, let it take its course instead of going down the rabbit hole with it. So this is a pretty straightforward one. And it's called box breathing, and it's something used by the Navy SEALs. And you can imagine they have pretty stressful jobs. And here's a good way to think about it is all you're doing is just focusing on your breath. What's going to happen is you're going to remember that you have, to do laundry tonight. What are you going to have for lunch? Your brain's going to constantly be pulled in different directions, and that's okay. The name of the game is just bring your attention back to your breath. So the way that we do this is you breathe in for 4 seconds, and don't start now. I'm just walking you through it. There's a guide on the next slide. But you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and then you hold it for 4 seconds. We're going to go through this for about 2 minutes just because of time today. And there's a guide on the next slide. So before we hop into it, I just want you to take a regular breath in with me. Here we go. Now breathe out. Now breathe in for 4 seconds. Now, oops, my slide. So you can follow this guide and hold your breath. And breathe out. And I'll count this if you want to shut your eyes too. Hold. Breathe in. Hold. Breathe out. 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 Hold. Breathe in. hold, breathe out, hold, breathe in. All right, last round, you're doing great. Hold, breathe out, hold. Okay, now feel free to resume your normal breathing. I'm going to give you a couple seconds to reorient yourself. It can be can really level some people out. So in the chat, what did you notice or what are you feeling like right now? Hopefully that didn't put you to bed. That can be a really good thing if you're struggling to fall asleep. Yeah. Loose, calm, relaxing. Yeah. Calm. Okay, cool. So here's why I love that exercise. I think it's a really good beginner friendly one. And I go back to it all the time. And a good way to think about this is what it does is it takes you from one of these to the other. So we talked about your stress response. That's a bodily response. And what happens is, as you can see on the left-hand side, things like it's preparing your body to do certain things. And this is called your autonomic nervous system. And it's just automatic processes that are fired off by your nervous system. So you stop digesting food, your heart's pumping quicker, you're breathing quicker, and it's helping you get ready for something. On the other side, which you've just activated, is your parasympathetic nervous system. So that's the other side of the coin where you start breathing slower. It's called the rest and digest too. That can help you fall asleep. It helps you digest food. So these are just automatic processes. And the cool part is that both of these can't work at the same time. So that breathing is really like a light switch to go from one to the other. So when you feel yourself really, getting taken away by maybe it's that challenging story or that email or there's something pulling you away, that's a really good tool you can throw in and be able to take a step back. Because when you're in that stress response, you might not think through things as logically or come up with as good of ideas. So it's a really good way to like take a step back and handle things before you just keep panicking.
Hey,
Yeah.
Ryan, quick question on that. How many kind of cycles do you recommend that somebody does in the four-step process there?
So if anyone has an Apple Watch, that breathe function that they have, that's a minute of box breathing. I think that's probably like if you're in a pinch, that's enough. I like to, I usually do that for like 4 minutes if I have the time, but even 2 minutes is enough. So, and the other thing too is like you don't have to like shut your eyes or go to a dark corner or anything like that too. That's something if you're in maybe a heated discussion or something like that. I'm giving away the answer to this question, but it's something where you can just do that in the moment. So part of this is just trying to start to notice the stress and be able to manage it in the moment, which
Yeah.
that's something where like awareness starts to grow over time, but it's like a muscle or anything else.
I'm just thinking about, I'm sure a lot of people are in this situation where you go from calls and you go like back to back to back on
Yeah.
calls, and it seems like that the stress can kind of stack up a little bit.
Yeah.
What's interesting, if you're saying, man, like a minute to 2 minutes, you could almost end a call, go through a quick box
Yeah.
breathing exercise, go on to the next call in a completely different mindset and be ready to focus on that next call.
Yeah, and I like that you use the word focus too, because that is going to help you like really you're a lot more locked in when you're like that too. So I think it's something like that's what I love about it too, is like there's not many things where you see results that quickly, but
Yeah.
I think this is something where, doing it before a big negotiation or any type of meeting can be super important.
Yeah, I don't even think I could drink a whole cup of coffee that quick between those meetings, but this
Right?
I
Yeah. Yeah. Internal or external email. Yeah, Nancy, I like that one a lot too. And I have my personal rule is like if you have an email that gets you ready to, if you're really wanting to respond negatively to an email, like just wait 20 minutes and that tends to let things go for you. Um, I'm going to skip ahead a little bit, but I think one of the things that, going more on so that's like just a helpful tool you can insert during your day if you're dealing with stressful situations. I'm not saying that's going to fix everything in your life, but if anything to take away from that is there are some things you can do to be able to handle some of these difficult thoughts, feelings, emotions in a very healthy way, as opposed to, many other alternatives there. So in modern work, and by modern work, I just mean we're all connected to devices nonstop. We're doing a lot of things, and there's, it's nothing wrong with that, and it's not like I'm pointing the finger at someone, but it can feel like there's a lot going on at all times, and all of those kind of factors converging of you're supporting a bunch of different clients. You feel like you always have to be on. You're having trouble keeping up with everything demands in life. And I think that can lead to a lot of challenges for you. So the one thing I would advocate is I leave it somewhat open ended, but is having some type of a system to run your day. And this can be and I would actually advocate more on the side of less complex, like just having a simple way to run your day or know where to focus. And I'm going to go through a tool that's pretty tried and true and classic, but I love this quote on the left: if you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. And if you think about things like burnout or having a difficult time, it's when you react to everything else that you constantly feel like you're behind, and you feel like you're reacting to everything else and you have little control over your situation. So, even the first part about controlling your stress, that's something that can give you more agency and more power, and start to grow some more confidence and help you out in these situations. But when you have a system, and I'll go through a couple ideas and examples for you, some good things that happen is you start to have more clarity on what's important, and you're spending more time on what's important. What happens there? You tend to do better work, you tend to get better results, and things grow from there. The other thing too is decision fatigue. So if you have a to-do list that's 3 pages long, which I'm saying, that can easily happen, but if you don't have any certain way to figure out where to focus, it can feel like no matter what you do, you're always behind, and then that can lead to the helplessness of, okay, why should I even bother? So I'll go through this really quickly, and this is the Eisenhower matrix. If it's good enough for a president, it's probably good enough for me. But the way that it works is it's a really helpful way to separate your work by what you should focus on. So the whole idea, and there's other different ways to do this too, but I'll go through my fancy laser pointer here. This breaks up your task on the axes of importance and urgency. And those are a little bit different, because important means how much does this specific task relate to your bottom line, or whatever your main focus is in your job. So, like, is this going to help me get a customer live? Is probably a good milestone. And that's like one of the things that can make life a lot less stressful, is if you can clarify what your focus and what your goals are. On the other end is urgency. Urgency just means, does this thing have an assigned timeline? So the first bucket is things where you're going to be doing, you're going to spend a good amount of time here, is things that are important and urgent. Good example might be, maybe there's a customer that, has a milestone where they can get out of their contract if they're not live in the next 5 days. That's probably where I'd want to spend the quickest, my time, the fastest. On this right-hand side, this can be a good career leverage point, where things that are important, but they're not urgent. And if we're always reacting, we can never do those things that maybe it's setting up a really helpful system for you in the future. Or a good example, just to, come up with this, would be like, if a company realizes that they can build a new product and capture 10% market share, but no one is necessarily batting down their doors for it. That's something that, if they're always reacting to things, maybe they just miss out on something like that. So the whole idea of schedule is, there are probably a few things that you can do to give yourself more time. You can set up better systems or achieve something really promising, but no one's really bugging you to get it done. So those are things you might want to schedule throughout your week.
Ryan, I think, as dumb as this sounds, I think of my inbox when I think about that. Like, it's important for me to make sure that I get through it. Not everything has to be answered within 5 minutes.
Mhm. Yeah,
And if I just constantly have it open, every time I see something, I feel like, oh, I got to get to it right now,
yeah,
versus saying, hey, look, like, I'm going to dedicate this time frame or this hour to get through it. Like, it's important, but it doesn't have to pull my undivided attention always.
exactly.
It
Yeah.
always dings.
Yeah, I think I quote this all the time, but I'm a big Seinfeld fan, and Jerry asks his neighbor Newman, who's a postal worker, why they always go crazy, and he says, because the mail never stops coming. It's the
Yeah.
same way the work is going. Like, those emails aren't, you're never going to hit that inbox zero. Just stop chasing that dragon. But on this, not important but urgent. These are things that like delegate is really helpful. And I get a lot of pushback from people that might maybe they're not a manager, but a different way to think about this is you can delegate things to technology. So something, a good example of that might be maybe you're using like call recording software instead of to write your follow-up emails, or maybe you're using something like ChatGPT, or you can automate a report that you're typically sending out through a software. And then on this right hand, bottom right, is the not important, non urgent. These are things where it might take a little bit of an ego bruise to you, but like always be looking for those things that you're doing that might not, make a huge difference, or maybe there's something that we can automate this with, or it's truly not making a huge difference. And the last thing I want to cover quickly is in the chat, I'd love to know what's the first thing that you do when you start your day? And you start your work day. I don't mean I brush my teeth or anything like that. What's typically the first thing? And once again, it's not a gotcha question. It's helpful data. I ask this to everyone.
Yeah, I guess I can speak on this one, but for me, it's open up the inbox. That's
Yeah.
that's it, right?
Yeah. So I think that was my MO for a really long time. And what I would do is I had a team I managed in Europe. I'd open my eyes and I'd turn on my email, and then I'd automatically be worried about the four fires going on. And the thing
Yeah.
is, yes, those Todd, you brought up a really good point. The Eisenhower matrix, really, those it mattered. It's important, but did it need my attention at 5 o'clock in the morning? Probably not. So that was one of the bigger psychological adjustments. So there's a few different reasons why I want you to reconsider that, and and I'm going to propose not the craziest alternative, but it might be very contrary to what you've done in the past. So there's a few reasons why starting with email and Slack can be a really challenging way to start your day. First, it can put you in a bad mood. Maybe you open your email and then, three things went wrong overnight. The second is we talked about reactivity and losing control. It immediately becomes what you got to do for other people versus what you personally need to get done. And then the third is it sets you up for distraction or multitasking. So it's going to send you in a million different directions. There's a lot of different things to do. So maybe you came in with a plan, but immediately that plan gets wiped out because something else has happened that you might perceive as more important in the moment. So this is some really interesting research that they did at Dell when they were looking at computers, and they actually found this relates to humans as well. So as you put more projects or you run more processes on a computer, its performance starts to degrade. So if you look at this chart, it's not the prettiest looking thing. I didn't make it, but the on the dark blue is like the amount of time working on a project, and then the green is the time lost to context switching. And context switching means you're writing an email, a Slack notification pops up, you click on that Slack notification, maybe you send a funny GIF, you check on three other things, and then you come back and then you say, what was I doing? So that's a time loss that can typically take anywhere from 5 to 30 minutes. And there's not a perfect number for that, but the more the task is difficult and the more brain power it requires, the longer it takes you to reset. So this is a really sneaky way that pulls your attention throughout the day and makes you very, very ineffective. And I know you might be saying, well, I kind of have to multitask. Here's the thing. Most of us check messages every 3 minutes. This is from a blog called Rescue Time. And I'm not saying that we can work like monks. I know that's completely unrealistic. But one thing that I found was a really helpful way to circumvent this is, I'm not sure if anyone's familiar with the 80-20 rule. It just means 80% of your results come from 20% of your efforts. I took that and put it on my calendar. And I said, okay, I want to spend 20% of my day, which is about an hour and a half, on proactive, focused things that are going to help me move things forward. And I quickly realized if you spend a half hour with no interruptions, you can get a lot of stuff done. Like mind blowing. I know it doesn't sound like the craziest thing in the world, but truly give it a chance and you can see some pretty decent results here. Because if you think of when you're getting interrupted, if that happens, it's not a big deal. Maybe it just happens every 10 minutes. That can be up to an hour gone in your day. So there's a concept that I'll send all these slides to just so you have them too, but a concept I like to call digital boundaries. So these are ways where technology is very much designed to pull your attention away. That's why if you look at any notification, they're always red. That's because the human brain is supposed to notice things that are red and be more urgent. So you think of stop signs and red lights. It's very much engineered against our psychology. But the good thing is you can use technology to make things less distracting. So some things that have worked really well for me and that might make a difference for you in these focus blocks is shutting off notifications, because those let anyone take your time for any reason at any time. Things that are an app blocker, if you struggle with, like, maybe you're checking Facebook or the news or LinkedIn a little too much, you can download these softwares that you can plug in what times you don't want to go on it, and it will just take that option away from you, which is pretty cool. It doesn't require willpower. And then some of the other simpler things, like environmental, is maybe you put your phone in another room for that half hour. Maybe you shut off your Wi-Fi where you have what you need to do in that time, and maybe you don't need the internet for it. And then here is my routine, and then I'm going to take questions from anyone that wants to kind of cover anything in more detail. So it's really simple, but this is the routine that I've kind of implemented that made a huge difference, where I was able to start to do a lot more in a shorter amount of time. At the end of my day, I used to go home and think about work all the time, and I really struggled to shut off. One thing that made that a lot easier is I would start that at the end of my day, I would write out, okay, these are the things I need to do tomorrow. And then I would circle my top 1 to 3 things. And then instead of hopping on email that next, and so first of all, that let me shut down pretty well, because I knew, okay, this is my game plan for tomorrow. I can go to bed. I can feel good about, like, I'm in a good mood, and I can start tomorrow strong. I know exactly where I'm going to start. And then the next day, I would have that first half hour blocked off, or that I moved that up to 60 minutes. And then I would hop on and I would do whatever I said I was going to do. I would do that, top 1 to 3 things in the beginning of the day. And then instead of feeling frantic and distracted and like I was already playing from behind, I would get a few things done. I'd feel good about things. Start the day in a positive mood. And then things started to go off from there. So I think combining the 3 things is working for a half hour in the morning on something that is important to you that you need to get done, having that time blocked off, and then ending your day by just writing out what you're going to do tomorrow to kind of close the loop so you can unplug a little bit better.
Brian, I think that I'm one of those people that are just as guilty as the day is long about thinking, I'll remember that when somebody tells me something. I'll remember that. I'll get to it. And
Yeah.
I swear that just causes you more stress thinking I'm going to remember something than just taking the 2 seconds, writing it down into a spot and kind of saying, hey, I'm going to manage this and get to it tomorrow. Because then in the night, you're like, oh man, like what was I supposed to do tomorrow?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that kind of worries you in that piece of it. And when you were talking about that, I'm like, man, like I'm like a perfect example of the guy that says I'm going to remember it. That just causes myself more stress.
Mhm. Yeah, I completely agree with that. That's something that, I would be guilty of that too. And your brain isn't great at remembering things too. It's not a good storage device too. So like getting it out of your brain, you have the benefit of, like, it's going to get remembered, and it's not something that you're going to think of. I feel like when I was keeping things in my head or
Yeah.
checking email at all hours of the day, I'd end up like watching TV and then remembering something and then going on email and then losing even more time.
Where they say that the dullest pencil is better than the sharpest mind, something
I
like
like
that.
that one. Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So just a quick recap, then we can hop in any questions that you might have. So I would say, it's not rocket appliances, as they say, but like as you can create a better mental state for yourself. And I'm not saying that it's this, 15-minute exercise and you're good, but it's something worth like investing time on, because you start to perform a lot better. And I've read many books on performance, and a lot of it starts upstairs. So it makes a huge difference for you. The second is that another thing of like why you need a system is like, and why you might be in chaos right now, is that like when everything is important, nothing's important. So that's a thing where you might have to, and this is something that I certainly had to do, is like even challenging people on like, okay, so I had someone come up to me and say like, even my CEO, I would push back and say like, okay, you want me to do this, like I'm happy to do it, but you also have me doing X, Y, and Z. What would you rather me focus on right now? And just kind of setting, because I know my CEO has a million things. It's not me, causing a stink or saying I don't want to do something. It's truly taking the time to figure out where we want to focus. And then I'd say reducing your multitasking is a surefire way to do things in less time. And it's really, that focus is a muscle. So it's going to be probably a little bit difficult when you do nothing but work for a half hour. Even though that sounds like nothing would happen, I'm telling you, give it a shot tomorrow. And either way, I really appreciate everyone joining today,
Yeah.
and I'm open for any questions.
No, that's awesome. Look, I'm a believer that no one will invest more in you than yourself. And I think lots of times that we forget that this is a self-investment of slowing down and really understanding, because we're all going to have stress. Like that's just a given in
Yeah.
life, but it's a matter of, are we managing it, seems to make all the difference in the world of how we can get from A to B in a lot better. Like this is just like straight down the fairway for somebody like me. So, yeah, it's awesome, awesome. But maybe some folks have a few questions or some other things. But for me, the takeaways. I don't need 10,000 takeaways. I need the two kind of that you outlined to put into practice. Game changer, game changer.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Todd. And yeah, anyone, any questions at all, or if there's something that you'd like to go a little bit deeper, I'm happy to help.
Ryan, give us your contact information. Give everybody a
Yeah,
way to
I'll
get
throw
in touch
my.
with you as well too.
Uh, yeah, so that's my website. I have if you log on there, there's a newsletter that I send something out every week. Tons of good content on there as well, and resources.
That's awesome. Well, hey, I can't thank everybody enough. Seems like the chat got a little quiet here. Thank you, everybody. Once again, right, we're Guide CX. We do customer facing project management, specifically designed for like onboarding, new customer onboarding. Thank you, Giddy, for giving us a little shameless plug there. But wonderful advice here from Ryan. My hope is that you continue to come back and learn from some of the best, like Ryan. Reach out to him. And can't thank everybody enough for jumping on here. Have a wonderful rest of the week, and we'll be in touch here soon.
Yep. All right. Thanks, everyone. Take care.